greatest.
The original, the all, is like the original darkness. It's the zero. And that's like the all. And then from the all was birthed into creation the one, which instantly created the two. Because duality was born from the all. The yin and yang was split. From one came two. And the one was the light of the ether, which is order and life-giving. The other was the abyss, was chaos. So the ether and chaos, or the abyss, are the two within the one, if that makes sense. Anyways, really, we're getting into some deep stuff with Manly P. Hall right here. Really amazing lecture.
Conceivable illusion. Every number but one being an infinite chaos, with thoughts of tendon.
I would definitely recommend watching, at least 20 minutes before this mark to catch up, but we're just diving in.
Of life, forever supporting and sustaining more than love as we know it, for it represents the nutritional tenderness of life.
That's the ether.
Forever supporting and sustaining. And chaos represents the abyss, the pathos of being, the hyle, the meaningless or terrible confusion of things. Therefore, we have the universe divided now into two principles, the bound and the infinite. Bound being ether, the infinite chaos. But this is now infinite in the term of infinite confusion. Here is the greatest conceivable number. Chaos is the greatest conceivable number, which means the greatest conceivable illusion. Every number but one being an illusion. The greater the number, the greater the illusion. An infinite number becomes...
This is based on the monad in Greek philosophy. And that the monad, the oneness, the totality, and everything is within that, playing out. It's the monad fracturing itself. And,
infinite illusion.
Earlier in this talk he said, ignorance is born with the belief in more than one, or something like that. Ignorance is born at the number two, and continues. And it's kind of like, what are you seeing? Are you seeing your reflection everywhere? Are you seeing the oneness in, what perspective are you looking at? Are you trapped in polarities of good and evil? Well, it's like that. Yeah, Hermes would agree.
Opposed to infinite truth. And out of this also comes the bound, or ether, which becomes the one. The one and the numbers, emerging out of the monad, or the numeration. So one, or ether, is the number as first, the first of many, the father of multitudes. And the multitudes are the extension of these powers into various expressions of activity. Then, like the Druids, who may have derived some of their knowledge from this, the Greeks believe that the bound and the infinite, that is, the stress or pressure between the one and the many, resulted in a whirling motion, which was called a kind of nebula, a spiral whirling in space. And that from this whirling there was gradually formed the structure of a great egg. And this egg was a kind of second world. And this egg was patterned after the principle of principles, in the sense that it was an enclosing thing. But unlike the principle of principles, it was already enclosed within that. So this was a kind of internal egg within the great sphere of ageless and eternal time.
Damn. Manly P. Hall is so high caliber. His stuff on the Greeks and Greek religion and like their knowledge and advancement in art and wisdom, philosophy. It's just so much. Like his breakdown of it is just, it's unparalleled. Like, goddamn. We get like the little snippets of Greek mythology, but that wasn't even their religion. And like what these ancient Greek philosophers knew who were initiated into these mystery schools, like Pythagoras, this master mathematician, alchemist, musician, numerologist, astrologer, like, goddamn. You know, we're left with his theory. This, you know, what do you add to science? But damn, listen to Manly P. Hall on the Greeks. Anyways, I'm going to pause this and come back when there's juicy stuff.
And this whirling sphere, composed of bound and infinite, plus minus, reduced the whole equation to a mathematical formula. And then, as this reached a certain degree of intensity, or densification, the egg broke. And from the egg burst the great deity Phaedes. Phaedes is almost exactly the same described figure as that of the cherub of Ezekiel. It is the winged being with the heads of the bull, the lion, the man, and the eagle. And in this tremendous concept, Phaedes represents the revelation or the objectification, the emergence of the principle of principles in its first modification. Greek philosophy moves.
Okay, this is getting juicy now. Wow. Every motion, every notion of Greek philosophy moves upon this.
A triad consisting of a father, a power, and a mind. The father, the power, and the mind. Now, in this particular concept of things, the father is our principle of principles.
That's meaning the all.
The power that comes forth from that is the whirling of ether and chaos and the production of the egg.
Wow. So the yin is power, the whirling of chaos.
From the egg bursts the mind, Phaedes, radiant with all the attributes from which are to emerge the concept of a rational world. Now Phaedes therefore becomes the principle of principles in its aspect as now the principle of being, and in its further aspect of universal mind. This, however, is divine mind, resting eternally in the principle of principles. Nothing that we have now discussed has been...
So the Trinity is the all, divine mind, which is the light, and the chaos principle, which is the life, which is the feminine, which is the power, the divine power, the Holy Spirit, basically, how I understand it.
Seen by the eyes of man at any time from the dawn of things. These
the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. The Son being the divine mind.
processes took place within the mystery itself, and all that we have is the symbolical description of them. Now, from the great throne which it had established, in the midst of the great field of the egg through which it had broken, it followed the same idea that you'll find later in the story of Castor and Pollux, who were born from a single egg. And we find now name Uranus. Now Uranus was actually the father of a triad. He was therefore the first part of the cosmic mind triad. He was the first aspect released by Phaedes, the symbol of universal intellection. Uranus, or Uranus, therefore, was the god of the sky. But actually, he was the deity within whom all other things lived and moved and had their being. For creation must take place within him, as he must function within the next larger area. These monads are always retiring to the center. So Uranus becomes the symbol of a great power. And this tremendous principle of heaven itself has various terms or titles bestowed upon it. It is the omnipotent, inasmuch as nothing that is beneath it can resist it. It is not immortal. They are the knowers. Intelligibles are things that may be by substance known, or may by substance know. In other words, an intelligible deity is one that can be known without the necessity for intellection, or may know without intelligence, as we know the term. Therefore, the intelligibles are those who are known by apperception, or are known by the instinctive consciousness of man himself. Beings that you do not define by thought, but you learn of by experience, by inwardly perceiving the fact, not by ordinary reason or rationalization, but more by mystical experience, by flash of divine insight, as the prophets of old, or the sages, who talked with the great ones, according to the scriptural writings of most people. These are the beings that are known as a direct impact of consciousness, not an impact of intellect alone. So Uranus, the great symbol of heaven, was therefore the master of the great court in which the stars were innumerable.
He's talking about the religion and the philosophy behind the Greek pantheon and mythological gods. And it's funny. The Greeks, it was so obvious to them that there was the one first, the all, that they didn't even bother having to write about it. It's funny. Manly Hall explained that at the beginning. But let's continue here.
Courtiers and gods over which he presided. And in this great world which he was master over, there was one thing, however, which he could not master, because he was not immortal. And the thing that everything is a slave to, who is not immortal, is time. Time, regardless of vastness of duration, destroys ultimately anything that is destructible within time. So Uranus, according to the Greeks, the sky in infinite motion, by the fact that it possessed...
So Uranus was the father of the sky, and Uranus is a super important player in mythology. Super important. Uranus, Kronos, and Zeus. Uranus is an interesting thing.
Infinite motivation and mutation within itself. Whether it knew it or not, inevitably became a clock. These time mysteries arose out of the very motions of the heavenly bodies themselves. And all of motion immediately creates time interval. Therefore, Uranus was the father of Cronus, who was the symbol of time. Now, Cronus is spelled in two ways, either with a K or...
So Uranus is the father of Kronos. And Uranus is the father of Saturn then. That's crazy. Wow. Saturn, Uranus, and the Sun. Interesting.
With a C. And Cronus, spelt with a K, is not merely the Greek form of the Latin. The Greeks themselves recognized two forms of the deity, although we use the two forms of spelling as the simplest way of differentiating them. This would not be quite in the Greek way, but it helps us not to confuse the two names. The Greeks recognized a Cronus that represented a principle of time, and then a Cronus that simply represented the movement of time itself. One was the law behind time, and the other was time in its own natural motions. The law behind time is wise and deep and mysterious, but time itself is a despot, the reaper. And those who do not understand the law will hate the manifestation. But those that understand the law will know why the operation of it is the greater good. But man must know the principle or the power behind things in order to become aware of their goodness or their necessity or their nobility. So Cronus becomes...
Wow. I love how he said that last. Let's rewind.
Principle or the power behind things in order to become aware of their goodness or their necessity or their nobility. So Cronus...
Welcome to philosophy with Immortal Truth. Philosophy is the seeking and the knowledge of prime causes or principles and seeing them in everything. It's a good definition of philosophy, I think. That was kind of sourced from Manly P. Hall's Intro to the Secret Teachings of All Ages. Let's go.
Becomes now the second aspect of a triad. And of course, remember that each of these triads branches off and has secondary triads dependent on the second aspect of a triad. And of course, remember, so Cronus becomes now the second aspect of a triad. We come therefore from Uranus, which is the father of this great intelligible triad. We pass to the second power of it, which is Cronus, the power. For time is the power which rules creation.
Wow. That aligns with Kabbalah too. This guy is so fucking on it. So Kronos is Saturn. And Saturn rules Bina on the Tree of Life, right? Which is the dark sphere to the left of Kether. And Kether is literally Uranus in the Tree of Life then. Maybe. But third is going to be wisdom. It's going to be Chokmah.
And then we come to the third aspect, the mind of the triad. And this is Zeus. And we have a triad again established now.
Wow. Wow. That's badass. So Zeus is the mind of the triad. And it's the third principle. Understanding, which is Bina, which is Saturn. Understanding is like the virtue of it, I guess, almost. Because it's to understand the principle behind Saturn and the law. Wow, cool.
Representing the primary trinity of powers. The Father, the power of the mind. Uranus, Saturn or Cronus, and Zeus or Jupiter. These three together constitute what might be termed the middle world. And they are divided by the hypothetical time factor. The superior part of this triad pertains to the great cycle of heaven, which is Uranus. The inferior part to Zeus, which is the beginning of the mundane diffusion of things. The second part is Cronus in its own right. Now these three deities together Moving into the human analogy, for all these things apply on innumerable levels, so carefully worked out that it is almost inconceivable. But on the human level, these three represent the psychic field of man. We therefore have man located between three tremendously contending parts of his own nature. We have the psychological emergency created in man by time, the resistance of ambition to time. We find the human soul having its actual terrible journey through time, the seeking to escape time, and the tyranny of mind in the more material sense that we know it in. So we have these three great dynasts that take over the universe. We have Thales, the splendid symbol of cosmic intellect, universal divine mind, creating a world in which this divine mind is divided into three parts. And these three parts may well be represented by the superconscious mind as Uranus, the conscious mind as, in this case, Zeus, and the subconscious mind by Cronus, the peculiar binding factor which holds these things together. For we must realize that in the development of the human mind, the conscious mind, was the last to appear, not in the middle, as might be implied from our placing the term consciousness between unconscious and superconscious. These terms are more or less obsolete in psychology, but they will help us to orient this concept in Greek mythology or Greek religious philosophy. So we have that part of mind which contemplates the nature of reality within itself. And we have Uranus, who, so to say, dreams the creation of the world. The mind which of itself never actually changes, but permeates through into the conditions set up within itself. We have this mind suddenly bound by the limitation of time. We find that which is neither old nor new suddenly becoming old and new. We find time taking up the tyranny over the universe, as represented by Saturn or Cronus. And then we find, in turn, the kingdom taken from Cronus, as Cronus took it from his father, and the kingdom turned over to Zeus. And why was the kingdom in this case turned over to Zeus? Simply because in the procedures of these things, there must come out of time the primary production of mind moving with time, and that is law and order. Consequently, out of the various subjectives and the various mysteries of things arises the demiurgic power, the orderer, the organizer, that which comes forth to make all things possible, to make all things reasonable.
Wow. If you ever study Gnosticism, this aligns so hard with Gnosticism and the creation story in the Nag Hammadi scriptures and the creation of the demiurge after the one power created the two, or the architect. Also aligns heavily with Kabbalah. Wow, the Greeks were on it. This is amazing. It's quite revealing if you're into astrology, Kabbalah, Gnosticism. And the mythos. Wow. Blown away. I'm currently reading Manly P. Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages. That book is thick. That book, plus the Bible, plus another book of choice, would be like the Trinity. Because that book is literally a description of all knowledge in mystery schools. that book, the Tao in the Bible. That's all you need in life.
Or we have Zeus emerge as human consciousness emerges in the process of maturity. So in the Greek philosophy, man is a spiritual being, has always a certain divine consciousness natural to him, which would correspond to Uranus. He descends into the mystery of generation, as Narcissus, looking at his image in the pool, falls in and drowns. He then has another kind of mind, the mind of death, the mind of the reaper, or the mind of disillusionment and despair, Saturn or Cronus. And having therefore attained a new position, having ascended to a middle distance between heaven and earth, he then becomes a human mind. And by taking his human mind, he disposes of the phantoms of the superior and the inferior, and locks himself into the true concern of his own kind, which is the appearance.
Alrighty, you can go watch this lecture by yourself. This is Immortal Truth. Manly Behold, Divine Dynasty, Uranus, Cronus, and Zeus. We tapped into ancient Greek mythology, creation stories aligned with Kabbalah. And yeah, hope you got some out of this. Hit that like button. Let me know. Thanks for watching these transmissions. And yeah, this is Immortal Truth. Truth that was, that is, and that will be. Peace.